everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you all virtually. So thank you so much for having me here and letting me talk about this thing that I absolutely love and adore, which happens to be our games industry. Today I'm going to walk you through a little bit of a celebration of each other as developers, past, present and future. It does sound a bit like a developer Christmas carol. I'm like the ghost of developers past and present, and I hope that you will be the future, which is the fun one. I'm Louise for those of you who don't know me. I'm executive producer on the next new IP from Rare called Everwild. So I always start these things with a story because I think it's more personal. So here's a little bit about my journey into games. For me, the start of my journey as a developer was completely unplanned on so many levels. You know, I didn't start my life thinking, oh, I want to be a creative leader when I grow up. That isn't where I started at all. From a very young age, there was only one thing that I ever truly wanted to be, and that was to be an animator. I was actually obsessed with all things Disney and all things animation. And I realise now that there was probably a reason for this idea of this ultimate acceptance to be away with the fairies, as my mum called it, to be quirky and different, and to want to escape into a plethora of worlds filled with magic and adventure and characters. This was my calling. My initial plan was to absorb as much animation as I could when I was young. Then my plan was I was going to go to the renowned Disney-funded college in Ballyfermot, Dublin, to become a master of classical animation. Then obviously I would be discovered by Walt Disney himself, who had been dead for a little while at this point, but it didn't matter, he would discover me. I would be plucked from inner city Dublin and I would move to Burbank, California and become a celebrated and respected animator. I'd work in all the big films, of course, and then finally I would retire. If I retired, because I'd probably die in my animation disc as a renowned animation superstar, because that exists. I actually did manage to do some of this. I managed to absorb all things animation, and I still do. That part of me hasn't left. I also managed to land myself a place at the esteemed Ballyfermot Senior College. Ballyfermot Senior College itself was esteemed, the place not so much for those of you who know Dublin. And I was training as a classical animator for a long time, when suddenly, as much of a surprise to me as anybody else, I met my now husband and we fell pregnant in our first year in college together. Obviously, this wasn't part of my plan. I was repeatedly told at this stage that I wouldn't come back to college, that this is the end of my career and opportunities. I was actually told specifically by the course leader that I would have to be Wonder Woman to return to college after giving birth. But luckily for me, Wonder Woman happens to be one of my absolute idols, if you haven't noticed. It's probably upside down. Becoming a mother didn't actually change my desire to be an animator. Ultimately, it motivated me. Every time I was told that I couldn't do it, it motivated me even more. And it's still a way to motivate me. Tell me I can't do something and I'll show you that I can. So ultimately I became Wonder Woman. I went into college on Monday. I missed class on Tuesday because I'd gone into labour and given birth. We had no class on Wednesday. I missed drawing and sketching on location on Thursday. And Friday's classes happened to be cancelled because it was a student induction day. And the Monday after, I went straight back to my animation board in class and was animating. I mean, her timing was perfect, by the way. She came at a perfect time. I'm telling you this because, not to recommend it, by the way. I don't recommend doing this to anybody. Take your maternity and your paternity. The hardest thing in life you can do is have a baby. They're wonderful, well worth it, but it's hard work. My point about telling you this story is that nothing should and can ever stand in the way of you and your dreams. They are your dreams to chase after and yours to tweak and change as you decide. Life will throw a few things in the way, but it's up to you to kind of adapt to that. I actually realised at this point that maybe it was okay for plans to change. So I decided I would take advantage of that and look for an opportunity as part of that. And so I applied for a job in a game studio for an industry that I actually knew very, very little about. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I knew nothing about the games industry. I was so focused on the film industry. But as every good potential employee does, I decided to research for the interview by playing one of the latest studio game releases, which just so happened to be GoldenEye on the N64. You remember that? You won't. Shame. So I fell in love with GoldenEye, and I began to fall in love with the games industry. In '99, I took a chance. I applied for Rare. I went for an interview. And I'm really, really happy to say that Rare took a chance on me. And this is when I first became a developer in this wonderful games industry. And this story leads me to my first takeaway piece of advice. Keep an eye out for where new opportunities may present themselves. A plan is great, but plans can and will always change, but you can be okay with that. Be okay with that. Actually embrace change, as it may lead you to find another more wonderful and perhaps even better route as a result. Over the past 20 odd years, I'm starting to lose count. I'm one of those people, with birthdays, how long I've been in the industry. I start to forget how long I've been in the industry. So it's over 20 years. And in that time, I've been able to observe and sometimes be a part of changes in the industry. And there are 4 areas that I think I've noticed the biggest and I find are the most interesting changes in that time. The first one is the audience. When we released GoldenEye, it was actually the 3rd best-selling game on the N64 with over 8 million copies sold, which was a culmination of sales over a few years. It wasn't this hit release straight after it launched. It was a couple of years. These were, and still are, by the way, big numbers. But back then, we measured our success based on hard copies sold. Now we don't. We focus on making sure that those players that play return. How long they play, how do we keep them sticky? Our audiences back in '99, in a way, were actually pretty exclusive. When you think about the faces of audiences now, gaming back then was this new, actually expensive hobby. I don't know if you remember what it was like to try and save up for a console, but you had to have some cash to get a console on release day, and you had to be happy to dedicate hours of your time to a game. Numbers of, for example, female gamers fluctuated from console to console and game to game. In fact, Pac-Man, a game that was created specifically to try and appeal to wider audiences, was one of the only game in the late 80s or early 90s to actually appeal to a female demographic. But audiences have changed. There are now over 3 billion, that's it, yeah, I said billion, 3 billion gamers across the globe, and nearly half of gamers identify as female. Games are far more accessible than ever before, thanks to things like Game Pass or being able to play on PC and mobile devices. Our audience potential for every game we create is huge. So it's more important than ever that us as developers represent that audience. And that is the second most interesting change that I've observed. And it's the shape and the look of the teams of developers who make these games. A survey done this year by Zippia of game devs in the US discovered that only 23.7% of devs identify as female. And over 71% of these devs are of white ethnicity. And these changes are actually still quite small compared to what they need to be. That's current data. The biggest change is that now 60% of game developers are over the age of 40. We've actually all grown up with this industry. The good change is that we have this diverse range of ages represented in our games development teams, which does actually represent the age demographic of our players. Diversifying our teams is definitely better than when I first started, and despite it not improving nearly half enough, the change I have seen is more and more support for underrepresented and minority groups in the industry. We're better listeners than ever before, and I feel threads of incredible supportive communities and networks all around us. But, there is still work for us to do here. And I implore you as the future of the industry to continue to do this work as you enter games, so that in 20 years, you could be here and tell a very different story. My takeaway from this is always seek perspectives other than your own. Creatively, you will ultimately be a better developer if you seek feedback from players who are different to you. Be curious and be inclusive. Thinking differently is actually what leads to a lot of creative thinking and creativity in this industry. And that leads me to the final big changes that I've observed in my time as a dev. These changes are actually around the technology we use and the games that we are creating as a result. I like to think about the birth of the film industry. It began in 1895 when the Lumiere brothers projected moving pictures to the first ever paying film audience. By the mid-1930s, I should have said that in English, by the mid-1930s, most films were in sound and in colour too. So to get to colour and sound in films, it took 40 years. Think about that. We've been making films since 1895, and the biggest change in recent years has been our move to 4K digital, or that we can actually watch 4K at home in our sitting rooms. In comparison to films, Pong, which was the first ever successful commercially released game, which was released in 1972, started with lines of coding language of which a human could interact with and control, based on a simulated game of tennis. In the 50 years since we have made the very first game, the language, the capability, our capabilities, the visuals, the design, the engines, and the all-up technology and creativity has completely changed and evolved, thus changing the experiences that we as developers deliver to audiences everywhere. This industry is super fast-paced, and it's actually one of my favorite things about this industry is how fast-paced it is. We can be nostalgic on occasion. I like to be nostalgic. I'm wearing my Conquer t-shirt. But man, do we love a new engine and all the frills and tech that comes with it. And I really like the comparison to the film industry, because I actually believe that people for a long, long time have underestimated the power and the creativity and the passion that the games industry has to offer. This year, the film industry is worth approximately $76.7 billion. Sounds like a lot. Well, the games industry is worth over $180 billion. We're actually more successful, we make more profit than the movie industry and the music industry combined. We absolutely should not be underestimated. And I believe this marriage of new audiences, new technology, and a real desire to push and do more has been responsible for the change in the gaming landscape that we see. And there really is something for everyone on any device. We as an industry, we strive to seek out new ways to build experiences for our 3 billion potential players. We've embraced indie. What a wonderful, wonderful space to have. We've encouraged creativity by giving developers access to lots of ways to create and express themselves, from paper prototypes to building in Java or Unity. Nothing is a barrier to anyone being a developer, except yourself maybe. And this leads me to my next takeaway. Make things. Get involved in jams, make a paper prototype, watch some tutorials and build something in Unity, create a video that pitches a game. We are makers and builders and tinkerers and creators. So, make, build, tinker and create. Do this as often as you can. So, what does this all mean for the future of the games industry? I think it means that there are many, many unmade games, which sounds sad, but let me put this another way. I think it means that there are many, many new games that have yet to be developed and experienced by players everywhere. I think the games industry is the most, and I may be biased, is the most exciting and innovative industry to be a part of. You just look at our 50-year journey so far. I cannot even imagine what the keynote speaker at GI Academy in 50 years from now will be talking about, but I hope I'm around to see it. What I do know is that games are more accessible, they're more beautiful, they're more technical, and they're more creative than ever before. We are capable of creating whole worlds for people to escape to and share with others, where friendships are born and nurtured, and where communities are grown and supported. So, as I wrap this up, because I can go on a little bit, I've tried to keep it as short and concise as possible. If you want to forget all that filler that I've just chatted to you about, try and remember these takeaways. Number 1, look out for opportunities and seize them where you can, and remember, even the best laid plans can go astray, but that's okay. You are the owner of your own destiny. Number 2, be curious. Ask questions, ask for feedback on your projects, on your games, on everything, especially of those around you who don't look or think like you. Those are the people you want to look for. You have the power to make this an even more inclusive industry. You have the power for change, so absolutely be that change. And number 3, make, build, tinker and create in whatever way you can. Show your passion for and love for this great, wonderful industry by always wanting to create more things. That's ultimately why every single dev gets up and comes to work every single day, to build for others. We don't build for ourselves, we build for others. That's our job, and it should and could be yours too. Finally, and probably most importantly, should I forget to say it, have fun. So just in case you hadn't noticed, we make games for a living. We are absolutely not brain surgeons or saving lives, and you absolutely shouldn't feel the same kind of pressure or stress as a brain surgeon. Like if you're making a game that's making you feel like the stress of a brain surgeon in the middle of an operation, then maybe we should have a conversation. Ultimately, make sure you have fun doing what you're doing. The most important thing that you can do for yourself is enjoy your job. I'm lucky enough to be able to say that I have loved the last 23 years of my job. I love my job, and I hope that I will get to enjoy the next 23 years as much. I think I will. I already know I will. I'm making something wonderful. It's part of a wonderful studio in a brilliant industry. So I'm really looking forward to the next 23. And so with that, I'd like to say thank you. Thank you to you for listening to me ramble on, and I hope it was helpful, and I hope it maybe inspired you a little bit. Thanks to Will and Chris for asking me and answering my random emails, even when I forget to respond to my own emails and go, oh, I have to do this. And ultimately, I hope you all have a wonderful day and a wonderful journey into the games industry. I've been Louise, and today is Sunday, so I'm going to finish this off and head on downstairs and make a lovely roast dinner. See you around.